Part 1. The Plumber's Disguise. In the shimmering splendor of the Grand Hyatt Ballroom in Midtown New York, as the orchestra played a classic wedding, Waltz, my son-in-law, Trent, pointed at me with a look of derision and spoke loudly in front of hundreds of guests. "He's just a retired plumber. Used to be a nobody, just a driver for our family." I stood near a side pillar wearing a cheap suit I'd bought at a discount store in Queens last week. My scuffed black shoes seemed entirely out of place on the thick plush red carpet. The plastic watch on my wrist felt like a joke amidst the room's opulence. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, bouncing light into every corner of the spacious ballroom. The modern colonial architecture blended with luxurious white and gold decor. Guests in designer tuxedos and expensive silk gowns clustered around the buffet tables, which were filled with dishes labeled with the names of a Michelin-starred chef. The music was soft, yet my voice was swallowed by the clinking of glasses and the guests' laughter. I had no place here. Even the waitstaff passed me by without offering a drink. Some guests posed for photos, subtly shifting their positions so I wouldn't be in the frame. Trent stood on a small stage with Naomi, both in impeccable wedding attire. He had just finished his speech on behalf of the groom's family. My name was never mentioned as the father, not once. All that came out of his mouth was a cold, cutting phrase, "Someone who once helped our family out when things were tough." A few chuckles rippled through the room. Whispers began to spread like wildfire. "Seriously? That's the bride's father. Why isn't there a family table for him? Is he really just a plumber?" Naomi stood stiffly beside Trent. Her face was pale, her eyes fixed on the floor. She dared not look at me. Her lips were sealed. Not a single word came out to contradict Trent or defend me. Trent's mother, Mrs. Hayes, smiled thinly while clutching Naomi's hand, as if to emphasize who truly belonged there. I remained motionless, watching it all with a chilling dread in my heart. No one greeted me. No one cared. I was a ghost in the midst of a radiant party. The unraveling. Then, a middle-aged man in thick glasses and a grey suit stopped directly in front of me. He frowned, looking at me intently, his eyes narrowed as if trying to recall something. "Wait, I've seen this man in Forbes magazine. Isn't that Mr. Miller?" His voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for a few people nearby to hear. Tension instantly electrified the air. Guests near me began to glance, secretly pulling out their phones, quickly typing something into the search bar. Curious faces morphed into expressions of shock. The music flowed on, but the atmosphere had changed. Something was shifting. Trent was still on stage, chuckling as he thanked his own extended family. He proudly praised the prominent names in attendance, mentioning their titles and companies. But he didn't realize that eyes were starting to drift from him to me, eyes that had changed from pity to suspicion. I took a deep breath. Behind my faint smile, my mind replayed the events of 3 weeks ago. It started when Naomi first came into my office, her eyes sparkling with the news of an engagement she believed would bring her happiness. The moment she asked me to be someone else. The day I decided to grant her request, even though a small voice whispered that something wasn't right. I remembered her hopeful face, her conviction that Trent was the right choice, and I, her father, wanted to trust her. I wanted her to be happy, even if it meant pretending to be someone I was not, even if it meant allowing myself to be trampled in public. But now, in this magnificent ballroom, amidst the gaze of hundreds of eyes that were beginning to question everything, I knew one thing for certain. This test wasn't just for me. It was a test for Trent, for Naomi, for everyone who thought a person's worth could be measured by the clothes they wore or the car they drove. I looked at the empty glass in my hand. No one had filled it. No one cared. And amidst the glamour of this wedding, One word appeared clearly in my mind: the test has begun. A father's decision. Mr. Peterson, the man who had called my name, was now whispering to his friend. His friend immediately opened his phone, typed something, and his eyes widened. They both looked at me again, this time with a completely different expression. No longer a look of disdain, but one of respect mixed with confusion. The whispers spread faster. Guests exchanged information on their phone screens. Some began to look at me with new eyes. I could feel the energy in the room change, like a gentle breeze before a storm. Trent was still speaking on stage. His voice was full of confidence, boasting about his family's connections, mentioning the names of big corporations they claimed were their business partners. But his hand began to tremble slightly as he raised his champagne glass for a toast. Perhaps he was starting to sense something. Perhaps he saw the change in the guests' faces. Mrs. Hayes still smiled, but her smile no longer reached her eyes. She glanced at the whispering crowd. Her hand gripped Naomi's more tightly, as if to ensure that her only daughter wouldn't leave. Naomi herself looked increasingly pale. Sweat beaded on her forehead, despite the cool air conditioning. Her hand shook as she held her white bouquet. She occasionally looked my way, but each time our eyes met, she quickly turned away. I knew she felt guilty. I knew she was starting to realize that asking me to go undercover might have been the biggest mistake of her life. But what could I do now? I was already in this game, and the game wasn't over. A young woman in a bright red dress approached me. She smiled politely, but her eyes were full of curiosity. "Excuse me, sir. I'm Dina from City Online News. Could you please confirm if you are truly the bride's father?" I nodded slowly. "I am. But why aren't you sitting at the family table? Why are you standing here alone?" Before I could answer, Mr. Peterson stood beside me. He respectfully extended his hand. "Raiden Miller, I'm Ethan Peterson, Director of Liberty Bank. I attended your seminar on AI for education last year. I was deeply inspired by your vision." Silence instantly spread around us. The few guests standing nearby immediately closed in, wanting to hear more clearly. Phone cameras began to point our way. Trent on stage stopped talking. The microphone was still in his hand, but his mouth hung open without a sound. I smiled faintly at Mr. Peterson and shook his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Nice to meet you again." My voice was calm. There was no anger, no vengeance. Just the serenity of a man who already knew what would happen next and was ready to face it with his head held high. The setup. That day, I had just closed a deal to acquire a company worth $250 million with investors from Tokyo. But before I could sit down and enjoy a cup of coffee, Naomi rushed into my office without knocking. Her eyes were shining, her smile full of a joy I hadn't seen in years. "Dad, Trent proposed to me, but I need you to be someone else." I stood on the 35th floor of a skyscraper in Manhattan. The glass walls of my office offered a sweeping view of the bustling city below. Tall buildings stood like steel soldiers. The streets were filled with vehicles moving like ants from this height. My large mahogany desk was tidy. There was only my laptop, a few important documents, and a single family photo frame in the right corner. The photo showed me, Naomi, and my late wife Sarah, taken 5 years ago during our last vacation to Hawaii. I had just finished a video call with my planning team for the expansion of our artificial intelligence technology business into South Korea. My face was still serious, my mind still full of figures and market projections. But as soon as Naomi burst in, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a wide smile, that made her look like a little girl again. All my work thoughts vanished. She placed the coffee on my desk and immediately held out her left hand. On her ring finger was a small diamond solitaire on a white gold band that sparkled in the sunlight streaming through the window. "Look, Dad. Trent proposed to me during lunch break at Central Park. He even hired a violinist for the moment. It was so romantic. Her voice was filled with enthusiasm. Her eyes twinkled like stars. I hadn't seen her this happy since her mother passed away 3 years ago. A warmth spread through my heart, but a small worry began to grow too. I slowly sat down in my large chair, looking at the face of my only daughter, who was already 27. She had grown into a smart, independent woman, working as a graphic designer at a renowned creative agency. But when it came to love, she was always gentle and trusting. Who is Trent? What does he do? Who is his family? My questions came out more serious than I intended. Naomi sat on the guest chair opposite me, still smiling, but her smile faded slightly. Trent works at a securities firm, handling client relations. He's polite, religious, and a hard worker. His parents, well, they're good people, just a bit traditional. She started speaking more softly, fiddling with her fingers. I knew there was something she wasn't telling me. I waited, allowing the silence to speak for her. Dad, they are the type of family who doesn't like people flaunting wealth. They live simply, and I'm afraid if they knew you were the CEO of a huge tech company, they would misunderstand. They'd think I was just a spoiled rich kid. I frowned. So? Naomi took a deep breath. She looked at me with pleading eyes. Dad, I'm asking you for this favor. The first time I meet Trent's family, I need you to be someone else. Just be a retired plumber. Don't mention neurosmart. Don't drive the Maybach. Don't wear the expensive suits. Just be a simple, ordinary dad. I was silent. Her words were like a soft slap across the face. Be someone else. Hide who I truly am. For what? If Trent truly loved her, he would respect her father, whether I was a CEO or a street sweeper. Naomi looked down. Her voice trembled slightly. I know, Dad, but first impressions are everything. I don't want them to immediately prejudge me. I promise I'll explain everything after the wedding. But for now, please, this is important to me. I looked at the photo of my late wife on the corner of the desk. Sarah always said that true love didn't need a mask. But she also always said that as a father, my duty was to protect Naomi's happiness. Even if it meant sacrificing my own pride. I didn't answer right away. The preparation. That night, returning from the office, I opened the closet in my room. Among the rows of designer suits and silk shirts, I searched for old clothes I rarely wore. I found a cheap suit I'd bought years ago for a charity event in a remote area. A pale blue long-sleeved shirt with a slightly frayed collar and faded brown fabric pants. I took an old wallet from a drawer, filled it with $50 in cash and one local debit card. I put away my sophisticated smartphone and took out an old Samsung phone belonging to the office cleaner who had lent it to me. The phone was heavy, the screen small, the buttons stiff. I felt like I'd gone back 10 years. Then, I went down to the garage, neatly lined up with a gleaming black Maybach, the silver BMW sedan, and the white Lexus SUV I'd bought last year. But I didn't touch any of them. My eyes were drawn to the furthest corner of the garage, where a beat-up 2004 Toyota Camry was parked, covered with a thick cloth. I pulled the cloth off, and dust flew up. The car still smelled of old carbon and rubber. The internal audio system was obsolete. It could only play AM radio with a hissing sound. But the engine was still alive. I started the engine, and the rough rumble of the old machine made my chest tighten. This was the first car I bought when my business was just starting to grow. The car that once took me to my first meeting with investors. The car that brought Naomi to the hospital when she had a high fever as a child. I sat in the hard driver's seat, looking at the cracked rearview mirror in the corner. Then I began to practice. I changed the way I spoke. My voice, usually firm and clear, I made softer. My shoulders, usually straight, I allowed to slump slightly. I tried to smile in a more humble way, not the confident smile of a CEO. My name is Raiden, retired plumber from the Bronx. My voice sounded unfamiliar to my own ears, but I kept repeating it again and again until it sounded convincing. The discovery. The next day, I began to find out about Trent. I opened his profile on a job search site. His profile was ordinary. Education from a medium-tier private university. Work experience at several small companies before finally joining the securities firm. Nothing special, nothing suspicious. But I didn't stop there. I asked my assistant Jake to dig deeper. Jake was a former intelligence analyst who now worked as the head of internal security at my company. He never asked why. He just performed his duty perfectly. 2 days later, Jake sent a report. It contained information that kept me up all night. Trent was listed as one of the founders of a fintech startup called Smart Sharia. The company offered Sharia-based investment with promises of huge profits in a short time. But what made me suspicious was the lack of official permit from the Financial Services Authority, FSA. There was no clear company structure, just a simple web page and social media accounts with testimonials that looked fabricated. Even more shocking, NeuroSmart's internal security system detected suspicious activity. Naomi's social security number was used to register an investor's fund account on the Smart Sharia platform. The registration was done by Trent Hayes. I stared at the laptop screen, holding my breath. Naomi had never mentioned this. She didn't even know her data was being used. Trent was using my only daughter's name for a financial scheme whose legality was even questionable. I slowly closed the laptop. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from anger. But I couldn't confront Naomi with this information right away. I needed stronger evidence. I needed to see for myself who Trent truly was. So that night, I decided to fully embody my role. I would become Raiden, the retired plumber. I would enter their world and see with my own eyes how this family treated someone they considered beneath them. And if there truly was malicious intent behind this proposal, I would protect Naomi, even if it meant I had to destroy her happiness first. 3 days before the dinner at Trent's house, another notification came into my system. This time it was clearer. The investment account opened using Naomi's data was active. Funds had been deposited by several small investors, a total of almost $10,000. All transactions were recorded in Naomi's name as the guarantor, but Naomi knew nothing. I sat alone in my study, staring at the darkening New York sky. The lights of the buildings began to turn on one by one, like stars in the middle of the city, and I asked myself, how far does a father have to go to protect his daughter? How long should I remain silent and allow myself to be trampled, just to prove that love should not be measured by wealth? I rose from my chair, walked to the window, and placed my palm on the cold glass. Outside, the world kept turning. People kept living their lives. But for me, the coming week would be the hardest test of my life as a father. A test to see whether the man who wanted to marry my daughter was a sincere man or a wolf in sheep's clothing, aiming for my family's wealth. Part 2. The Hayes family dinner. A rough welcome. The intentionally wobbly chair, the drink that was never served, the half, sarcastic remarks, and the stares that stripped me bare from head to toe. At my future-in-law's house, I wasn't a guest. I was merely an unwelcome intrusion to their social class. I arrived at Cypress Garden Estates in suburban New Jersey exactly at 6 p.m. The gate of the residential complex was grand, featuring a security post with a fake gold-plated sign. The houses inside looked luxurious from the outside, but there was an air of being forced, like people trying too hard to look rich. Trent's house stood on the corner, a 2-story structure with clean white paint and black iron fencing. The front yard was neatly arranged. There was a cement swan statue and mushroom-shaped garden lamps. I parked my battered 2004 Toyota Camry in front of their house, next to a gleaming new Japanese sedan. The contrast was jarring. Before I could even get out, Trent emerged from the front door. He wore a light blue silk patterned shirt with black dress pants. His hair was neatly gelled back. His smile was wide, but his eyes were assessing me, from the top of my head to my scuffed shoes. I knew he was measuring how low my position was. "Welcome, Mr. Miller. Please come in." "Wow, that car is a classic, isn't it? Must hold a lot of memories." His tone was polite, but there was a subtle hint of condescension beneath it. I nodded slowly, bowing slightly like an older man accustomed to being humble. "Yes, son, it's an old car, but it still runs. Thank God." I stepped inside the house. The scent of air freshener was overwhelming, a synthetic mix of cinnamon and jasmine that made my nose itch. The living room was quite spacious, with a cream-colored sectional sofa and a glass table in the center. An abstract painting in a gold frame hung on the wall. In the corner, a display cabinet held decorative plates and small trophies. But something was odd. All the decorations looked recently purchased. No dust, no sense of being lived in for long. It felt like a stage set up specifically for a guest. Mrs. Hayes emerged from the kitchen in a spotless apron and full makeup. Bright red lipstick, sharply drawn eyebrows, and excessive blush. She smiled broadly, but her eyes were doing the same thing as Trent's, judging. "Good evening, Mr. Miller." "Oh, we finally meet. Naomi has told me so much about you." I shook her hand. "Good evening, ma'am. Thank you for inviting me." Mrs. Hayes looked me up and down for a full 3 seconds. Then her smile widened, but it felt cold. "Well, your outfit is quite classic, Mr. Miller. Looks like my late father's attire back in the day. Simple but respectable." The word simple came with an emphasis that made me know she wasn't complimenting me. She was marking my position. I just smiled, not replying. Trent pointed to a guest chair near the window. "Please, have a seat, sir. Make yourself comfortable." I sat down. The chair felt strange. One of its legs was shorter, causing it to wobble slightly every time I moved. I tried to sit still, but the chair kept rocking. Trent and his mother sat on the soft, stable and comfortable sofa opposite me. A housekeeper came out from the kitchen carrying a tray of glasses. Sweet iced tea was served to Trent and his mother in clear glass tumblers with small silver spoons. For me, a plastic cup with thinner, weaker tea, served without a spoon. The housekeeper placed my glass last, almost as if debating whether I deserved a drink. On the coffee table, several property magazines and investment brochures were spread out. All were open to pages featuring luxurious homes and expensive cars. They seemed deliberately placed for viewing. The subtle insults. Trent began the conversation in a tone that sounded like a talk show host. "So, Mr. Miller, Naomi said you used to work as a plumber, right? You must have lots of interesting experiences. Our family deeply values hard-working people like you." I nodded. "Yes, son. I used to work all around, fixing leaky pipes, installing faucets, cleaning sewer lines. Hard labor, but honest work." Mrs. Hayes laughed, but it was a stiff, forced laugh. "Oh, how noble, sir. Working with your own hands is truly commendable, not like today. Many people just sit in a big office, hold a pen, and feel like they're the greatest, when in reality, they don't know the meaning of sweat on the brow." A subtle jab. I understood her meaning, but I remained silent, nodding politely. Trent continued, this time with a more arrogant tone. "Coincidentally, I work in wealth management, sir. We handle investments for established clients. Our focus is on halal and secure investments according to Sharia principles. Our world is quite complex. Many technical things that might be difficult for the average person to grasp." I feigned confusion, scratching my head. "Oh, so like a savings cooperative, son?" Trent let out a forced, tight laugh. "Oh, no, sir. It's very different. Our world is much more intricate than that. We deal with financial instruments, capital markets, pooled savings, Perhaps you aren't familiar with those terms. I just nodded, pretending not to understand, but internally I was noting every word, the way he highlighted himself, the way he subtly belittled others. Mrs. Hayes interjected, her voice sweet but piercing. But we are still a simple family, Mr. Miller. We believe in hard work and honesty, not like people who just sit in a CEO's chair pretending to be busy, but actually don't understand anything. We built this from scratch with our own efforts. She stared at me as she delivered the last sentence, as if to ensure I understood, that they felt more honorable than rich people who didn't work hard. Naomi sat beside me, looking restless. She shifted her posture several times. Her hands kept twisting the hem of her dress. I knew she was aware of where the conversation was heading. But she didn't dare interrupt. She just smiled nervously whenever our eyes met. The stinging taunts. We were then called to the dining table, a long table covered with a patterned tablecloth. The plates were mismatched. The forks and spoons looked old. Some were rusty on the handles. For me, of course, the silverware in the worst condition. The dinner menu was homemade roast beef. Mrs. Hayes proudly explained that it was an old family recipe. I genuinely complimented the cooking. It's delicious, Mum. The seasoning is perfect. Mrs. Hayes gave a small laugh, but her tone was cynical. Oh, you know the taste of roast beef like this too? I thought you were only used to cooking instant noodles or simple fried rice. Everyone laughed, except Naomi and me. I just offered a slight smile, continuing my meal. Naomi looked down, chewing her food without appetite. In the middle of dinner, I excused myself to the restroom. Their small bathroom was clean, scented with lavender freshener. I closed the door and took out the old Samsung phone from my pocket. I opened the emergency email, which could only be accessed with a special code. There was an incoming message from Jake Sir. Preliminary analysis of the smart Sharia startup registered by Trent Hayes used Naomi's SSN and taxpayer ID. The active investor account already has total funds of $10,200. Naomi is listed as the guarantor. My hand shook holding the phone. I looked at my reflection in the restroom mirror, the face of Raiden, the retired plumber. But beneath this mask, a simmering anger began to rise. Trent wasn't just ambitious, he was using my daughter. He was exploiting her personal data without permission for a financial scheme whose legality was questionable. And his family? They looked at me like dirt, yet they had no idea who was truly sitting at their dining table. I returned to the dining table with a calm face. Trent was talking at length about his future plans. We've planned everything, Mr. Miller. After we get married, we'll buy a house in the Hamptons, a nice area, close to New York but quieter. Naomi will quit her job, focus on being a good housewife. We want to build a harmonious family with strong values. Then he looked at me, a slight smile on his lips. You don't have to worry. Naomi will live much better than she did during her childhood. I guarantee it. That last sentence was like a knife being slowly twisted. He was implying that I, as a father, was incapable of providing a decent life for Naomi. That he, Trent, was the savior who would bring my daughter to a better life. I just nodded, smiling weakly like a resigned old man. Thank you, Trent. I'm just a simple parent. The most important thing is Naomi's happiness. Mrs. Hayes proudly patted Trent's shoulder. My son is truly kind-hearted, sir. He's willing to accept Naomi as she is, even though, you know, her family background is simple. Every word out of her mouth felt like a slap, but I held it all in. I swallowed every insult with a smile, because I knew this was all a test to see how low they would stoop to treat someone they considered weak. The breaking point. I drove home that night with a burning head and a freezing heart. The old Toyota Camry drove slowly on the empty highway. The streetlights illuminated my tired face. I stared at the empty road ahead, my mind filled with anger and disappointment. Upon arriving home, I didn't go straight to sleep. I sat alone at the dining table. My strong coffee was cold. The rice on the plate was untouched. I opened my laptop, accessing NeuroSmart's internal financial system, and there I found something that made my blood boil. The initial fund for Naomi and Trent's wedding reception, $8,000, was transferred from my personal account without my consent, without my knowledge. I checked the transaction details. The transfer was made 3 weeks ago under the name Wedding Preparation Fee, with a note approved by Groom's family. But I had never approved it. My name was used without permission. I closed the laptop forcefully. My breath hitched in my chest. This was no longer about insults or low treatment. This was entering the realm of fraud. Trent wasn't just emotionally exploiting my only daughter, he was financially exploiting us. And the most painful part, Naomi knew nothing. Or perhaps she did, but chose to stay silent because she was too deep in the relationship. I stared at the ceiling, my eyes wide open in the dark night. Questions kept spinning in my head. How far should I let this go? When should I take off the mask and show who I truly am? But I knew this test wasn't over. I had to continue playing the role. I had to keep letting them underestimate me, trample me, until the time came to turn the tables. Part 3. The mask drops. The silence and the betrayal. For 3 weeks, my calls went unanswered. My texts only showed one grey check mark. The bouquet of white roses I sent was returned by Naomi's apartment. Security with a small handwritten note, "Please stop contacting me. I need peace." I came home that night from Trent's house feeling devastated, not because of the insults I endured, not because of the low treatment I received, but because I saw my only daughter sit silently, allowing it all to happen without defending her own father. She chose them. She chose Trent's family, who belittled me over upholding her father's dignity. In the elevator of the luxury apartment building where I lived, I stood alone. The mirror on the elevator wall reflected the face of an old man in shabby clothes. I stared at my reflection, and for the first time in my life, tears fell uncontrollably. I cried in silence. My body shook, my hands covered my face. No one saw. Only me and my reflection. The next morning, I tried to call Naomi. The phone rang for a long time, but no answer. I tried again. No answer. I sent a text message, one grey check mark, unread. I sent a voice message. My voice trembled. "Naomi, it's Dad. I just want to talk for a moment. Please pick up the phone." No reply, just painful silence. On the third day, I sent another message. This time longer. "Sweetheart, I know you're busy with wedding preparations, but I need to talk to you. It's important. It's about Trent, about things I've discovered. Please give me a chance to explain." The message was delivered. 2 blue check marks, read, but no reply. She read my message and chose not to answer. That was more painful than being ignored altogether. On the 7th day, I decided to send white roses, my late wife Sarah's favorite. Flowers, the flowers I always gave Naomi whenever she achieved something. I wrote a small card by hand to my dearest daughter. "Dad will always love you, no matter what happens. Love, Dad." I ordered from the best florist in New York, asking them to deliver directly to Naomi's apartment in Manhattan. But 2 hours later, my phone rang. Not Naomi, but the florist. "I'm sorry, sir. The flowers were returned by the apartment security guard. They said the recipient refused to accept a delivery from you." My heart felt pierced. I asked the florist to send a photo. The photo showed the fresh bouquet of white roses in a clear plastic wrap, and on top of it, a small slip of paper with Naomi's handwriting, "Please stop contacting me. I need peace." I sat on my living room sofa, holding the phone with a trembling hand. Flowers returned, messages ignored, calls rejected. My daughter, the only family I had left in the world, had decided to shut me out of her life. On the 10th day, I opened my social media. I rarely used it, but I remembered Naomi often posted photos there. I opened her profile, and the first photo I saw made my breath hitch. A pre-wedding photo. Naomi wore a simple white dress with a flower crown. Trent stood beside her in a light blue suit, his arm around her waist. They were smiling. The background was a garden with artificial cherry blossom trees. Beautiful, perfect, like a couple in a bridal magazine. The caption read, "Grateful to have a future husband and family who accept me for who I am." The words were like a lash. A family who accepts her for who she is, meaning Trent's family, the family who humiliated me at their dining table, the family who treated me like a servant. I scrolled down. Hundreds of comments, mostly congratulations, but one comment caught my attention, from Mrs. Hayes. "Our family is proud to welcome you, dear. You're already like a daughter to us. Wishing you well as Trent's wife." I kept scrolling, looking for anything that could explain what was happening, and I found a small detail in one of the background photos. A receipt, accidentally caught on camera, lying on the dressing table. I zoomed in on the photo. A receipt from Royal Catering Services, paid in full 3 weeks ago. Total, $40,000. Naomi didn't earn that much. Her salary as a graphic designer was only around $15,000 a month. It was impossible for her to have that much savings. I accessed my personal financial system again. I traced all transactions over the last 3 months and found it. An outbound transfer of $40,000. Destination, Royal Catering Services. Transaction note, wedding catering payment with approval of Groom's family. I had never approved that transfer. I didn't even know about the caterer, but my money was used. My name was used without authorization. Anger began to rise, but I held it back. I had to stay calm. I needed to find out more. I contacted Jake, my internal security chief. I asked him to investigate Trent and his family further. I asked him to find all financial transactions related to this wedding. 2 days later, Jake sent a comprehensive report, and its contents made my blood boil. Trent had used Naomi's personal data to open microloans at 3 different financial institutions. Total loans, $50,000 with high interest. All loans were guaranteed in Naomi's name. But Naomi knew nothing. Worse still, Trent's startup, Smart Sharia, had already defaulted on debts to its early investors. 7 investors were demanding a refund of their funds. Total demands, $6,500. And in the legal documents, Naomi's name was listed as the co-director, even though she never knew the company existed. Trent was setting a financial trap. He was using Naomi as a shield. If his company collapsed, Naomi would bear the consequences. If the loans weren't paid, Naomi's name would be blacklisted by the banks. I sat at my desk, staring at the report, my hands clenched. I wanted to go straight to Naomi's apartment. I wanted to break down the door and force her to listen. But I knew it wouldn't work. She had shut herself off. She had chosen not to trust me. So I decided to go directly to her office. Naomi's creative agency was in a trendy building in Brooklyn. A 3-story building with glass walls and black paint. I parked in front of the building and waited since morning. 9 a.m. Employees began to arrive. But Naomi wasn't there. 10 a.m. Still no sign. 11 a.m. I walked into the lobby and asked the receptionist, "Excuse me, I'm here to see Naomi. I'm her father." The receptionist, a young woman with round glasses, looked at me doubtfully. She glanced at my simple attire, then at her computer screen. "I'm sorry, sir. Naomi is working from home today. She left a message that she does not want to be disturbed by anyone from her past." The words were a slap. Her past. I was her past. I walked back to the car, my steps faltering. I sat in the driver's seat, staring blankly ahead. People walked past on the sidewalk. Life went on. But for me, time seemed to stand still. I waited there all day. No food, no drink, just sitting, waiting, hoping Naomi would show up. At 5 p.m., the building door opened. Naomi walked out with a backpack and a phone in her hand. She wore a white shirt and jeans. Her hair was tied back in a ponytail. Her face looked tired. I got out of the car. I walked toward her. My heart pounded. This was my chance. This might be the only chance to talk to her before the wedding. Naomi. My voice came out softly. But she heard. She stopped. Her body slowly stiffened. She turned. Her eyes met mine, and for a fleeting moment, I saw everything. Guilt, regret, fear, but also a firm decision. She didn't speak. She just looked at me for 3 seconds. Then she looked down deeply and quickly walked toward the street, hailing a passing rideshare taxi. I stood there frozen. I wanted to yell. I wanted to run after her, but my feet felt cemented to the ground. I could only watch her back walk away, get into the car, and disappear into the heavy New York traffic. She didn't even say a word. No explanation, no apology, nothing. Just devastating silence. I drove home that night with an empty heart. The apartment felt large and quiet. I sat alone at the dining table. The coffee I made was cold. The reheated food was untouched. I just sat, staring at the blank wall, wondering where I had gone wrong as a father. My phone vibrated. A message from my assistant Lisa. "Sir, we found the wedding gown vendor sent a bill to Trent, but the billing address is listed under Naomi's name. There's an additional charge of $3,500 listed for upgrading the package to VIP class, approved by the groom's parents." I read the message repeatedly. Groom's parents. That meant me. But I had never approved it. I didn't even know about the wedding dress, let alone a VIP package. My name was used again without authorization, without my knowledge. Trent and his family were using my name as they pleased. And Naomi, she let all this happen. I closed my eyes, a heavy sigh escaping my chest. This pain was different. It wasn't the pain of being hurt by someone else. It was the pain of being betrayed by the one I loved most in the world. But amidst the pain, something began to grow. Not vengeance, not blind rage, but a firm decision. I wouldn't let this continue. I wouldn't let Naomi fall into the trap Trent had set. If she wouldn't listen to me now, then I would make her listen at the right time, in front of everyone, at the wedding itself. I would drop the mask. I would show who I truly was. And I would make sure the truth was revealed, even if it meant shattering my only daughter's temporary happiness. The revelation. When Trent stood on the reception stage with a triumphant smile, I stepped from the shadows into the light. All eyes turned to me. The music stopped, the glasses ceased trembling, and time seemed to freeze. The wedding day arrived. The Grand Hyatt ballroom was filled with luxurious white and gold decor. White roses and lilies were arranged in every corner of the room. Crystal chandeliers glittered like stars. The guest tables were neatly set with silk tablecloths and gold-plated silverware. There were over 200 guests, business people, officials, important clients, and several social media influencers. I came not as Raiden, the retired plumber. This time, I wore a dark grey suit with subtle pinstripes, newly polished black leather shoes, and my late wife's old watch, a simple timepiece with a brown leather strap, but to me, it was a symbol of time that could never be regained. I wasn't invited. My name was even removed from the official guest list, but I had coordinated with the hotel manager, Mr. Lewis, who had attended one of my seminars 2 years ago. He allowed me to enter through the staff corridor via the back door used by catering workers. From behind the service door, I stood watching the wedding ceremony and reception. Naomi looked stunning in a long white wedding dress with a low-cut detail on the bodice and sleeves. A silk veil gracefully covered her hair, but her smile was stiff. Her eyes weren't sparkling as usual. There was a tension on her face, like someone trying to convince herself that this was the right decision. Trent stood beside her in a gleaming black tuxedo and a maroon bow tie. He smiled widely, greeting guests confidently. Repeatedly, he mentioned big names, connections to banks and investors, and his family's achievements. Every sentence was filled with self-pride. Every gesture showed he felt he had won something big. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes sat at the honor table looking pleased. Mrs. Hayes wore an emerald green gown with a diamond brooch on her chest. Mr. Hayes wore a black tuxedo with a white kippah. They looked around with judging eyes, ensuring everyone saw how magnificent this wedding was, how successful they were in marrying off their son to the daughter of a CEO, though they still believed I was just a lucky retired plumber with a beautiful daughter. I waited. I stood behind the door, observing everything like an invisible ghost, until the moment the reception music began to flow and guests moved toward the buffet area. I stepped out. I walked slowly through the side corridor, entering the guest area through a small door near a large pillar. Several staff members were surprised to see me, but they didn't dare question me because I walked with absolute confidence. Guests began to glance. Some frowned, whispering to each other. I walked toward the center of the room, stopping not far from the stage where Trent was delivering his thanks to all the guests, speaking into the microphone. His voice was loud and enthusiastic. Thank you to everyone who attended today. This wedding is proof that true love transcends background. We, the Hayes family, are deeply grateful to welcome Naomi into our family, and we promise to take the best care of her. Loud applause. The guests smiled, but I didn't. I just stood there, staring at Trent with a flat gaze, and suddenly Trent saw me. His smile slightly faded. He frowned, as if he couldn't believe I dared to show up. He lowered the microphone and then shouted loudly, "Security! This man is not invited!" All eyes immediately turned to me. Silence spread like a wave. The music stopped. The glasses ceased trembling. Guests stopped talking. All attention focused on one point. I walked slowly toward the center of the room. My steps were calm, unhurried. I stopped right under the large chandelier that illuminated the entire ballroom. Then I spoke, my voice soft but clear, loud enough to be heard without a microphone. My name is Raiden Miller, the father of the bride. Murmurs instantly spread. Guests began to whisper to each other. Some pulled out their phones, starting to record. Trent stepped down from the stage, his face pale. He tried to smile, but his smile trembled. Please, this man is the plumber who used to work at our house. He must have misunderstood and came without an invitation. A small laugh came from a few guests, but the laughter didn't last, because from the crowd, a middle-aged man in thick glasses and a grey suit walked closer. It was Mr. Peterson, the director of Liberty Bank, whom I had known for years. He stood beside me, his eyes wide. Wait, this is Raiden Miller, the founder of NeuroSmart. I attended his seminar on AI technology for education. Mr. Miller is one of the most influential technology entrepreneurs in the country. The silence immediately turned into an uproar. Guests instantly opened their phones, typing my name into the search engine. Within seconds, their faces changed. From confusion to shock, then disbelief. Whispers spread rapidly. Raiden Miller, CEO of NeuroSmart? He owns the largest educational technology company in North America. What's his company valuation? Billions of dollars. Wait, so he's not a plumber? Trent's face lost all color. His hand trembled. He tried to grab my arm, whispering frantically, "Sir, please don't embarrass my family. This is a sacred wedding. Don't ruin our happy day." I looked at him flatly. There was no anger on my face, only cold serenity. You ruined it yourself, Trent, not me. I stepped forward, facing all the guests. I took out my phone, opening several document files that Jake had prepared. Then I began to speak, my voice calm but firm. 3 weeks ago, my daughter asked me to disguise myself as a retired plumber. She said her future in-laws didn't like people who flaunted wealth. I agreed because I wanted to see how this family would treat someone they considered inferior. I paused briefly. Everyone listened intently. No one moved, and it turned out I saw it with my own eyes. I was treated like trash. I was insulted. I was belittled. My chair was intentionally wobbly. My drink was served last in a plastic cup. I was jabbed at repeatedly at their dining table. Mrs. Hayes stood up from her chair. Her face was crimson. She tried to calm the situation with a forced, sweet voice. "Sir, you must have misunderstood. We are just a simple family who didn't know the proper etiquette for receiving an important guest. This is all just a misunderstanding." I looked at her sharply. "A misunderstanding? Then please explain why the funds for this wedding, $8,000, were transferred from my personal account without my knowledge. Please explain why my daughter's SSN was used to open an illegal investment account under Trent's startup name. Please explain why my name was used to approve an additional wedding dress charge of $3,500 that I never agreed to." I showed my phone screen to the nearest guests. Several of them saw the transfer documents, the evidence of illegal data usage, and the unclear invoices. They went silent. Their faces changed from curiosity to horror. Guests began recording more seriously. Some started uploading videos directly to social media. I knew that in minutes this would spread across the entire internet. Trent was trembling. He tried to defend himself with a stuttering voice. That was just a temporary financial strategy, sir. I intended to return everything after my company grew. I didn't mean to defraud anyone. I stepped closer to him. Financial strategy? You used my only daughter's personal data without permission. You opened loans in her name without her knowledge. You made her the guarantor for a debt she didn't even know existed. And you call that a strategy? Naomi, who had been standing rigidly beside Trent, suddenly turned to him. Tears began to stream down her cheeks. Her voice was trembling. "Trent, what is Dad saying? Is that true?" Trent didn't answer. He just looked down. His hand shook, clutching the hem of his tuxedo. Naomi looked at him for a moment longer. Then slowly she removed the ring from her finger. The white gold ring with the small diamond that once made her so happy. She placed the ring in Trent's hand. "I can't marry a man who would cheat my father." "I'm sorry." Quiet sobs were heard from some of the female guests. A few people clapped softly, not out of joy but relief at Naomi's brave decision. Mr. Hayes tried to save the situation. "Enough. This is a wedding. Financial matters can be settled later. For the family's honor, the wedding must go on." I looked at him with an icy gaze. "Honor cannot stand upon lies, sir, and a true family is not built on forcing a marriage that was clearly wrong from the start." The videos began to upload. Within minutes, the guests' phones started ringing. Social media notifications flooded in. Sensational headlines began to appear on their screens. Billionaire CEO humiliated at daughter's wedding. Fraud scandal behind Grand Hyatt luxury wedding. Groom's family used illegal data for business. Trent tried to approach again, this time genuinely crying. His voice was pleading, "Mr. Miller, I love Naomi. This was all just a misstep. I promise I'll fix everything. Please give me a chance." I looked at him for a long time. A small part of me felt pity, but a larger part knew this wasn't about a second chance. It was about protecting my daughter from a man who had proven he was not trustworthy. If you truly loved her, you wouldn't have sold her father's name. You should have respected him from the start, not just because you thought he was rich. Hotel security staff politely approached, escorting Trent and his family out of the ballroom. Not roughly, but firmly. Mrs. Hayes still tried to defend herself, shouting about injustice, about slander. But no one was listening anymore. I stood in the middle of the room, which was now silent. The music was gone. The guests were still, looking at me with various expressions: respect, pity, awe, confusion. And amidst it all, Naomi walked toward me. Her body was shaking. Her wedding dress trailed on the red carpet. The makeup on her face was smudged with tears. She stopped in front of me, looking at me with eyes full of regret. Then, she hugged me tightly, like a terrified child, and she wept in my arms. Epilogue: The Waltz of Truth. After the truth shattered in front of everyone, the reception turned into a courtroom without a judge. And amidst the chaos, I stood by my daughter's side, balancing a father's love with the cold reality of justice. The remaining guests slowly began to move. Some left politely, some lingered, wanting to know what would happen next. Naomi, still clinging to me, finally spoke. Her voice was quiet but clear. Every word was heavy. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I was stupid. I was selfish. I hurt you only because I was afraid Trent and his family wouldn't accept me if they knew you were wealthy. I was wrong." Her voice broke. Tears flowed freely. Her body shook. I held her shoulders gently. Then I whispered softly enough for only her to hear. "I didn't want you to live a lie, sweetheart. But I also won't let you be alone. I'm here. I will always be here." Naomi hugged me again, tighter than before, like a child who had just woken from a nightmare. I let her cry in my arms, allowing all the pain and regret to be released. The orchestra, which had been standing awkwardly in the corner, suddenly played a soft melody. Not a wedding song, but a piece my late wife often played, an old song full of memories. It was a simple, traditional tune about a parent's unconditional love. I didn't know who asked them to play it. Maybe Mr. Lewis, the hotel manager who understood the situation. Or perhaps one of the musicians who felt sympathy for us. I extended my hand to Naomi. "Care for a dance, sweetheart?" She looked at me with tear-filled eyes, then nodded slowly. We walked to the center of the empty floor. No special decorations, no dramatic spotlights. Just the two of us, father and daughter, dancing slowly in the quiet ballroom. The remaining guests stood at the edges of the room, watching us in silence. Some cried. Some recorded the moment not to spread as gossip, but to remember it as a deeply touching scene. We danced in the quiet. There was only the soft music and the slow shuffle of our feet on the marble floor. Naomi rested her head on my chest, still sobbing softly. "Dad, I promise I won't hide who you are again. I promise I'll always be proud of you, no matter what anyone says." I gently stroked her hair. "It's not about being proud, sweetheart. It's about respecting yourself. Never diminish yourself as someone who doesn't value you." The song ended. We stopped dancing. The remaining guests gave a round of applause. Not applause to celebrate a wedding, but applause to acknowledge courage and true love. Postscript. The next day, the media published the full story with a balanced perspective. Several reporters contacted me for interviews, but I declined all of them. I didn't want to turn this into a public spectacle. I didn't want to seek revenge in a low manner. I only released one official statement through the company's public relations. This was a family matter that unfortunately had to be resolved in public. I hope all parties can learn from this incident. Respect and true love are not built on lies or material interests. A few months later, Trent tried to contact me. He sent a long email, apologizing, begging for forgiveness, even offering to return all the money, but I didn't reply. Not because I was vengeful, but because some doors, once closed, should not be opened again. Naomi slowly recovered. She returned to work, started smiling again, and became herself once more. She didn't rush into a new relationship. She said she needed time to learn to love herself before loving anyone else, and I supported her. I never pressured her to move on or forget. I was simply there for her, as a father should be. One day, I decided to donate a large portion of the cancelled wedding funds to a scholarship program, a scholarship for young women in technology, named after Sarah's love, my late wife. I wanted something good to be born from this painful incident. A few weeks later, as I was closing a meeting at the office, an anonymous email landed in my inbox. No sender name, no subject, just one short sentence. Thank you for teaching me the meaning of self-respect. A former prospective son-in-law. I smiled faintly. I didn't know if it was from Trent or not. I wasn't sure if he truly learned his lesson or was just writing to soothe his conscience. But I chose to believe that everyone deserves a chance to change. I didn't reply to the email, but my mind whispered softly, perhaps he finally learned that truth is the most expensive inheritance a person can give, and self-respect cannot be bought with money. I closed my laptop, stood up from my chair, and walked to the large window overlooking the city of New York. The sun was setting, coloring the sky in shades of orange and purple. Life goes on. People continue to chase their dreams, and I, as a father, had done my best to protect my daughter's dream. The test was over. The mask was off. And only one thing remained, the sincere love between a father and daughter that never needed to be hidden or faked.